Here I present to you the most disappointing computer I've ever dealt with. I've worked with Pentium 4s, AMD K-series chips, and even worse. But this computer is disappointing for a whole other reason. Before we get into that though, let's take a look into the specifications of this laptop. Specifically, the laptop in question today is an HP ProBook 450 G1. This computer released back in 2014 with a variety of options and configurations and reached prices of over $1,000. Initially, it seems that this 450 G1 came with an i7-4702QM, 8GB of RAM, a 750GB hard drive, a 15.6-inch display with a resolution of 1366 by 768, and a Radeon HD 8750M with 1GB of VRAM. These specs were pretty powerful for when they initially released, and honestly, they still hold up pretty well 6 years later. However, our model had a few parts swapped out. Whenever I get a new computer, the first thing I do is format the hard drive to avoid messing with any sensitive data, but previous to this, I do a bit of research on its model number to get an idea for what I'll be expecting upon opening it up. So I anticipated some old hard drive with 8GB of RAM, but instead was greeted by 16GB of RAM with a 250GB Samsung Evo 840 SSD, which really took me by surprise. Clearly, there were a few system upgrades done to this computer, and whoever did them did forget to replace the screws, but hey, that just makes it easier for me to remove the components. But how, I hear you asking? How is this computer so disappointing? Well, after I removed the SSD, formatted it, and stuck Windows 10 on it, I quickly realized why someone would have gotten rid of this computer. Towards the top of the screen, there were multiple black circles running across the top of the laptop, which made its usage rather annoying. In addition, the charging port was all sorts of messed up and was very fiddly to get correctly connected. And so, when I first removed the charging cable, the charging port came out with it and was stuck inside. Luckily though, I was able to get it out and eventually properly reconnected. So even though the system packed a decent amount of power, its damage significantly impacted its resale value and made it unworthy to give it to a friend who definitely could have used it. And that's what makes this laptop the disappointment it truly is. Regardless, it was still pretty powerful, so I downloaded a few modern games like GTA 5, PUBG, Fortnite, along with a few others and began testing. The benchmarks today were recorded externally and were ran with a variety of settings that will later be specified, but were all played in a resolution of 1366 by 768. But enough of that, you came to see if this old laptop could game, so let's get right into the testing. To begin, I tested Grand Theft Auto 5. With all the purple versus green alien beef in online mode, I opted to remain in the campaign and drove around for a bit. For this test, I wanted to get as high a frame rate as possible and ended up running all settings at the lowest. And unfortunately, the bottleneck of this system immediately emerged in the form of the 8750M. It was always pinned at nearly 100% during gameplay and remained so throughout many of the benchmarks. But for the test of Grand Theft Auto 5, the rest of the hardware was able to pull through and achieve an average frame rate of 35 FPS. Next, I ran some Fortnite Battle Royale. This game has a feature where it automatically detects the ideal settings for one system, and after using that function, it unsurprisingly set them to the lowest with a 3D resolution of 62%. However, although the 3D resolution does significantly impact how the game looks overall, it also impacts its performance quite a bit. Still though, I raised it up to 100%. After a few minutes of testing, the average frame rate was 49 FPS and ran pretty well. Next, I ran some PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds with all settings as low as possible and achieved an average frame rate of 29 FPS. Although it was playable, it wasn't very enjoyable, and it probably wouldn't be a good idea to play this game on this computer and expect a victory. Additionally, once again, the GPU was a severe bottleneck with every other component not running consistently at its maximum capacity. Following PUBG, I ran a bit more peaceful game on this system and played some Minecraft. All settings were at the max with 15 chunks selected, and the game ran very well, achieving an average frame rate of 56 FPS. Something was a bit odd about this test though, in that the GPU was rated running 200% and had a temperature of 511 degrees Celsius. I don't know why it did this, but the game ran well, so I have no complaints. Then I played one of the most toxic games known to humankind, Rust. From my experience, this game will often use over 10GB of RAM and does not run well on systems with only 8. Luckily, this computer had 16, so I expected some decent results. I wasn't given these, however, as the weak graphics card held the system back quite a bit, resulting in an average frame rate of 23 FPS. The CPU ran around 30% and the RAM was nowhere near being fully utilized, all while the GPU was running at 100%. But I guess luckily, this was the only game that I tested that I would consider unplayable. Afterwards, I got into some more easier to run titles and played a bit of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Given its age and system requirements, I knew that this computer would have no problems running it, so I used all the highest settings without VSync. By the end of gameplay, the average FPS was 43 and came with a little bit of stuttering, but was overall very playable and could be well utilized in competitive gameplay. Sticking with the idea of competitive gameplay, I then ran some Rocket League on the system. I ran this game with a general mixture of medium settings selected and got an average frame rate of 39 FPS. Overall, gameplay was smooth, enjoyable, and ran great on this computer. To finish off with the benchmarking on the system, I ran a few lower end and older titles on this computer to give it a bit of a break and reach those higher frame rates. To start, I ran Half-Life 2 with all settings at their highest, got an average frame rate of 117 FPS. As expected, the game ran superbly and got the best FPS out of all games tested on this computer. For the final game, I ran another title from Valve, Portal 2. Just like the Half-Life 2 benchmark, I ran all the settings at their highest without VSync, but in this test I achieved an average frame rate of 77 FPS. This was the second best performing benchmark out of all done on this computer, and thus concludes the testing of this ProBook laptop. So that's just how well an older HP ProBook will perform in modern games in 2020. But in general, the games tested probably perform better on this ProBook than other ProBook computers, since the one I received had received multiple upgrades to the system. However, there was a big issue with gaming on this laptop, as seen in many of the tests where the HD 8750M graphics card was a significant bottleneck of the system. This can be combated with an external GPU adapter, and I do have one coming in the mail, but it will be a few months until then due to cross-sea shipping. But yeah, this computer was all sorts of whack. Initially it seemed great because of the upgrades in its powerful i7 processor, but the damage it has sustained really was a letdown. I mean, as clearly demonstrated, the computer is still functional, but its value and its user experience has suffered very much. I was looking into getting a replacement screen for this laptop, but that would cost about $60, and combined with the other issue of an inconsistent charging port, I think I'd be better off just leaving this computer as is. So I'll probably pull the RAM out of the system and install it in another laptop with an i7-2630QM, an SSD, an HD 677M, and an additional hard drive when this connector arrives in the mail. And one last thing before you go. Do you want exclusive videos and unreleased footage with a behind the scenes look into the channel? Well, then join the Discord, link in description. Regardless, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. Also, please leave a comment below because interactions with viewers will help boost this video on the YouTube algorithm. While you're at it, please subscribe because that helps a lot in video quality and production and also positively affects my day. Finally, leave any questions or suggestions in the comments below and have a great day. Bye.